Think scaling AI is hard? Think again. With Watson X, you can deploy AI across any environment. Above the clouds, helping pilots navigate flights, and on lots of clouds, helping employees automate tasks. On-prem, so designers can access proprietary data, and on the edge, so remote bank tellers can assist customers. Watson X works anywhere, so you can scale AI everywhere. Learn more at ibm.com/WatsonX. IBM. Let's create.
In just a little over a week, we're voting in a completely new set of elected city leaders, which includes a brand new mayor. So for those still deciding, we're continuing our series of mayoral candidate interviews taped back in the summer. Today on CityCast Portland, we're revisiting a conversation I had with mayoral hopeful Liv Osthus. She's an iconic Portland stripper as well as an outspoken sex workers advocate. She's also a published author and has been a fixture in the local music and art scenes. And joining me to fill you in on how the race has changed since we last spoke with Osthus is our very own executive producer, John Notarianni. It's Monday, October 28th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. John, thanks again for joining me.
Hey, Claudia.
Well, compared to all the other candidates running, Liv seems to have had the least amount of negative publicity surrounding her campaign so far. But, she was also not in public office, like the majority of our mayoral top runners. And, her campaign messaging has also stayed consistent, no curbs here. So she still wants to revive Portland by centering policies around our music and art scenes, and dare I say, bringing back the dream of the 90s. Where a barista or a bartender can pay rent and also play drums in 10 touring bands like God intended.
Oh, weren't those the days? I think that's exactly it, though. That part of the negative publicity probably comes from the fact that she doesn't have that much of a track record. She's been really involved in grassroots community stuff over the years, but she doesn't have city hall experience or even the business and nonprofit experience that some of the other front runners in this race have. And I think some people are probably still learning about her campaign, too. There was a poll by DHM Research earlier this month, and it said that Osthus was only polling at about 4% in the first round of picks. But at the same time, that poll had 30% undecided voters. So she could be picking up more votes as she goes. But I agree that since we spoke to her in June, not a lot has changed in the headlines surrounding her campaign, aside from possibly being seen as a more serious candidate than originally thought.
Yeah, I feel like there are many who are just oh, she's still campaigning? Just yeah. I think the only media flutter I heard around her campaign was actually self-made. She threw a significant amount of shade in her socials at OPB for not being included in their mayoral debate when she had been included in pretty much every other local major outlet's mayoral debates. But even still, she has racked up some endorsements, most notably to me, was Britt Daniels of Spoon. He wrote,
Spoon?
Yeah, the band Spoon.
The 19-year-old in me just got very excited.
We all got excited, I know. As a former Portlander, fellow musician, and one-time neighbor of Viva's, Viva Las Vegas, I've seen up close how she brings projects to life, overcomes challenges, and inspires with her integrity, creativity, and compassion. Leaders take many forms. I support Viva for mayor of Portland.
Britt Daniels of Spoon with the high-profile political endorsements.
I just love that he doesn't call her Liv. He's like Viva. Her stage name.
I mean, all joking aside, right? She's definitely put in the work on this campaign. It's been a very scrappy campaign, and she has been bringing her message to a lot of high-profile platforms. So, I understand why she would be upset if she's excluded from certain mayoral debates. She hasn't raised quite as much money as other candidates, but she's raised a lot of money for this campaign. And I thought it was notable that the Portland Mercury ranked her third in their endorsements. If you're keeping track, that's above current commissioners Mingus Mapps and Renee Gonzalez. And they acknowledge, she'd be a bit of a gamble as a candidate due to her lack of experience. But the endorsement also says people have been too quick to count her out. suggesting that like possibly she could be the next Bud Clark. So history lesson, Bud Clark was a local tavern owner who ran for mayor in the 80s. He didn't have any prior political experience, but he was really beloved. Do you know the Bud Clark story, Claudia?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the infamous photograph of him exposing himself to art.
Yes, that's Bud Clark. And this was a big promotional campaign for the Portland Museum of Art where he opened his trench coat to a statue from behind. But, you know, he was thought of as a successful and a beloved mayor. And the Portland Mercury is drawing that connection. And then they close out with this, which I think is a great quote. She's funny, candid, unabashedly authentic. We can't think of another candidate who exemplifies Portland more than her. Even if she doesn't win this election, we would like to see her stay involved in local politics, either by lending her voice to a committee or a commission or mounting another run for public office.
Yeah. Well, do you see any way for her to win this race with 4% initial poll?
I mean, I really do think with this ranked choice voting system that we've never used before, but we'll be using for the first time in a few weeks, anything is possible. Stranger things have happened. I personally don't think that she has the populist groundswell of support that it would take for a candidate like her to pull off a major upset. But Claudia, I'm wondering if she's not even trying to win and has a different strategy at play, which is a weird thing to say, but like, check this out. She's talked a lot about the ranked choice voting system. So even if she loses, any first place votes for Viva Las Vegas, Leave Osthus, are going to go to another candidate. And I think that she's looking at who are her ideological colleagues in the race and is trying to sort of pull votes for them as well. So like, you know, even if she doesn't win, she could be a huge decider in who does win.
Right. Well, let's get to our interview with Leave Osthus that we originally aired back in June, and we'll do so after a short break. Hey, Portland, do you know who you're voting for? If you're still researching your options, the League of Women Voters has a ton of resources to make voting easier for you. You can find reliable, nonpartisan, free information at lwvpdx.org, like videos and podcasts of candidate interviews. There's also balanced explanations of ballot measures. And this week, the League is also sponsoring a walk-in voter information table at the Community for Positive Aging at 1820 Northeast 40th Avenue. Volunteers will be there on Tuesday, October 29th and Thursday, October 31st from noon to 3 p.m. And also on Tuesday, November 4th from 1 to 3 p.m. Stop by to get help with using a ranked choice ballot or go to lwvpdx.org or vote411.org to learn more about the candidates and measures.
Why is Laura Stribe running for Portland City Council in District 2? Because Laura believes Portland is about community. She's lived in St. John's for over 20 years. It's about connection. Laura has been committed to advancing the arts, education, and listening to community. And it's about collaboration. Laura will work with folks to get things done. Laura is hopeful with the new charter reform and ranked choice voting that Portland can enter a new era of representation, investment in community, and fiscal responsibility. Arts and culture is what keeps our economy going and our city vibrant. Safety and affordability is what we demand for all Portlanders to ensure our neighbors can thrive and live with dignity. Our planet needs a green lens going forward as we upgrade our infrastructure and prepare for forthcoming natural disasters. Together, we can create a Portland to be proud of. Vote this November and rank Laura Stribe #1 for Portland City Council in District 2. Paid for by Friends of Run Laura Run.
This episode is brought to you by Buffalo Trace Distillery. Powerful yet smooth. Contained but never tame. Proudly going their own way, but never going alone. This is the spirit inside Buffalo Trace Bourbon. Made at Buffalo Trace Distillery, the world's most award-winning distillery. Buffalo Trace is always perfectly untamed. Distilled, aged, and bottled by Buffalo Trace Distillery, Franklin County, Kentucky. 90 proof, 45% alcohol by volume. Learn more at buffalotracedistillery.com. Please drink responsibly.
You know, you talk a lot about transforming empty buildings and storefronts around town into space for artists. If you were given a space right now, what would you do with it and how would you design it?
Wow. Hardball questions right off the bat. I love it. Well, so when I see the zombie buildings, is what we're calling them downtown, I mean, a lot of them are really unappealing skyscraper structures that, I don't know, they say that they're uninhabitable. That's what the people who own them say, that they're not suitable for living in. I maintain that artists can and do make things beautiful wherever they go, and they have the creativity to find a way to make those habitable. So I would turn it over to the artist. I'm not a designer myself. I would say, here's a building. We're going to test drive it. Let's get a team of imaginative artists who do have engineering chops, work with permitting people, and let's see what that group can design and imagine. And I think so much of my campaign is about imagination and then finding practical ways to get those ideas birthed.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say that that was the most softball question that I could
shoot.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I mean, if it was your building though, like you were going to live there, like how would you design it? Like I'm curious, like just the outside, inside, anything.
Well, my whole life I designed loft-like buildings. I always thought, I watched Fame growing up. I always wanted a big, raw studio space.
Totally.
That in my imagination would be next to free. And then those spaces became very popular and condoized. So, big empty space. I would put up a dance bar, I'd put up a pole, obviously. I'd get some beautiful Moroccan rugs. I would make sure to have a hearth-like gathering space, like Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, not with an actual hearth, but a place where people gather around to share ideas. I would take down any walls that weren't necessary to make sure that people could be together and could move and dance through the space. I would get plants and mirrors to reflect the light. I think reflecting light in metaphorical and literal ways is really important. It's another facet of my campaign.
That's the coolest mayor's office of all time already.
Stripper pole. So good for upper body strength.
Well, if you had to just pick one thing that you think isn't working in Portland right now, what would it be and how would you fix it?
Our narrative. When I decided to run for mayor, I was looking at the other candidates, with the exception of maybe one. They were all talking very darkly about Portland and a very pessimistic narrative. There are still wonderful things about Portland happening in Portland. And the more we belabor the dark narrative, the more that's how the rest of the nation sees us and how we see ourselves. And yes, we have significant challenges, but I think just in shifting that narrative as a storyteller, as a person who's an optimist, I think that is critically important. People need hope right now. Most of all, the people suffering downtown without housing and in the addiction spiral, they need hope too. And I think hope comes cheap, actually.
How would you create that hope or change that narrative then?
In the most basic way of presenting it on the podium as the mayor to Portlanders, to the nation. That sounds pretty naive and Pollyanna-ish, but I do think that's called for. And then to have artists bring the beauty and the music and the ideas, have those artists centered downtown and have that energy spread out. I definitely, I have plans for addiction services as much as the city is responsible for or is allowed to be a player in that realm. I have thought about the bigger issues more, but the fundamental pillars of my platform are to bring hope through arts, and by that I also mean, affordable housing and also the environment. I didn't see really an environmental candidate, and I think it's a critically important time. We all know this, that it's time to think radically differently about the environment and to center that in every decision that we make. And I think a lot of hopelessness comes from climate change and from just feeling so powerless. Our river is terribly polluted. The infrastructure hub down in Linton is ready to become the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history, and we're just doing nothing about it. We know these things, and we sit with it. We feel it in our hearts and souls, and that creates despair. So address these things. Talk about the gift of our beautiful river, the gift of our beautiful forests, the gifts of our imagination and our community. And that's what I want from our mayor. And I don't see it, so I'm running.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. Like, you've never held an elected office before, and you very clearly call yourself an artist over everything else. And I feel like that's a big reason your supporters are excited, is because you seem like a Portlander who wants to be mayor. What made you decide to run for mayor?
Well, did I want to become mayor? Or did I want desperately to have these ideas focused on in the mayor conversation? I saw a lack of leadership, obviously, in the last couple terms, and a lack of vision. And I think we all need to step forward and talk more about our ideas from our communities. My artist friends are getting pushed out of Portland. It started a long time ago, but it's speeding up radically with the lack of affordable housing. With the new form of government that we've voted in, I think that's a really exciting time to reimagine what politics, what service is going to look like in Portland. And as I'm campaigning and seeing all the candidates for city council, the energy is amazing. These people are such dedicated public servants, and they have the chops and the imagination. And I think just approaching this new form of government has energized people so much. And I saw a platform that I thought my voice would resonate upon, and that my gifts of just connecting across the aisle to many and varied communities that would serve Portland well. And, maybe I really didn't want to do this. In fact, I resisted a lot coming to this decision, but eventually it was harder not to do it than to do it. And I really appreciate just being able to have these hard conversations and to bring different parties to the table and talk about what could be different. We have to do things differently. It's so clear. And a lot of the messages I'm hearing from other mayoral candidates kind of are along the same narrative that's always been, and let's change it.
Right. You've also called out City Commissioner Mingus Mapps as a mentor of yours.
Absolutely.
He's part of the city council that you're seeing a lack of leadership with.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
it's true. Yeah.
I'm curious, how is he mentoring you to do something different?
Well, when I say mentor, to me, that means this is somebody who I know socially as a friend, and who, when I was deciding whether or not to take this path, sat down with me for coffee, encouraged me, told me the basic nuts and bolts. I don't think he and I mean, we're probably closer than we are far apart politically, but the path he's taking is different than I want to take. Like, he's a very kind, compassionate, liberal, person with an academic background like me, but who's kind of working within the system to change the system and using those tropes. And I'm saying, like, let's maybe burn it down and start over. Maybe not burn it down, but let's do things differently. But Mingus is one of 6 or 7 people I sat down with and had coffee with, people who had run for mayor like Sean Davis, Bim Ditson, people who are going to run for mayor but haven't declared yet. Ooh, top secret. I really was nervous about what this path was going to do to my life and what the drawbacks were, safety-wise, for instance, but also wanted to know, why the heck would anyone do this? And to a person, Mingus, Bim, Sean, they all just said it was the honor of their lives to engage with the community in this way. And that really surprised me. Like, just jaw to the floor surprise. Like, oh, this is an honor? Like, people screaming at you all the time and claiming you did everything wrong, and yet you feel so honored to be in that space and to be working for people. That really impressed me. And I sat with that for 8 months and finally jumped in, and I have to say, it's true.
What do you think makes you more prepared for the role of mayor than some of your opponents who are current city commissioners or even CEOs running large operations?
I believe that I have vision. I am a visionary, and that this is a time of where radical change is called for. I am connected throughout this community in many various parts of Portland. That's what we do at the strip club, is we connect with everybody. Every voice is heard there, as long as they're over 21. But I'm also connected to the 8-year-old community through my daughter. But I think it's time for a leader like that. The new form of government, that the mayor will have quite a different role, and we'll be hiring a city administrator. There are big players working alongside the mayor, so that in my mind, the mayor can be more of a visionary in this new form of government, can be a leader who speaks with optimism about Portland and lets the harder work of really fixing things that are seriously broken fall to the bureaus where that work should be done and where the experts are working within.
Yeah, you bring up relying heavily on experts, the expertise of others on city council to get things done if elected, because of this new form of government. But how will you decide on who's the right fit for the city administrator, police chief, and city attorney, since that will be your job in the upcoming charter change?
Well, I'm not going to be hiring those people unilaterally. Certainly I'll have a team with me to vet and interview and ultimately select those key players. But I do think I am an expert at connecting with people, at communicating with people, at comforting people. When I think of great leaders, I see people who really can connect across great divides, and that is critically important for this juncture in our history as a nation, as a city. And to really listen to different ideas and find the commonality. That is my area of expertise. And that is what I want from all of our leaders right now. And leadership didn't always look like people with MBAs or people with law degrees. Leadership was matriarchy. Leadership was very different historically. And I have a cultural anthropological background, and I'm ready to see very different people lead. Let's have artists lead. Let's have spiritual leaders lead. Let's try it.
So your platform states that centering the arts and having a hopeful outlook, as you've been saying, will help in addressing ongoing issues in Portland, like the housing and addiction crisis. But what's the actual plan there? Like, how will you ensure this will actually happen with all of your positive messages?
Well, so in terms of the housing crisis, we're looking into how are those zombie buildings, does the code exist to re-inhabit those, to make those low-income housing spaces? And I reached out to Randy Leonard. We had coffee, and he said the code exists right now. They could be reconfigured as housing right now. It's nothing that you'd have to change existing code to do. So just right there, like figuring out pragmatically, how is that possible in terms of like addiction and the healthcare realm? So that largely falls to the county, as we all know, and the city and the county has been in a scruff for a long time. I'm trying to figure out what levers the city has in, say, accessing state dollars or coordination from the state level or even the federal level. Learned a lot from Central City Concern, who is one of the federally funded addiction resource centers. Like, how can the city be a better player in the addiction crisis? What are our avenues as a city? And certainly we have to repair the relationships. It's ridiculous that a relationship between the city and the county can cause so much, a failing relationship between those two entities can cause such despair and death. That's, get over it. we gotta get those parties back at the table. And I think ideally like a top down from the state level to coordinate those resources throughout the state, because Roseburg has a terrible housing crisis. Roseburg has a terrible fentanyl crisis. The coast is suffering terribly. But all of these services are working very independently, oftentimes against each other, don't even have databases. I've been really impressed with a lot of the news coverage that calls that to our attention, that those people suffering downtown, there's not even a database to keep track of what's been going on with them and which services have been tried and where those services have failed them. There's a lot of places where we can mend this torn fabric. And yeah, I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah, what will you do, I guess, is the question. And I totally understand that, the housing crisis, that's a big deal. But I'm just saying, within the power as the mayor, what will you do?
Well, try to agitate for coordination from the state, make sure that the relationship between the city and the county is repaired, make housing available downtown. Like there's all those empty buildings. Like try whatever we can to make sure that those are available for low-income housing. Make sure that the jobs that are available are appealing to people, that they have competitive wages and benefits, like peer support services. That's a really important part of this addiction healing narrative. Make sure that nurses can afford to live here. Make sure that our public safety component is compassionate, is robust, ideally lives in Portland, can afford to live in Portland, and wants to live in Portland. So there's many ideas in how we actually affect those ideas. Again, listening, reaching across the aisle, trying to find areas of commonality to make this a conversation and not just shut down.
Mm-hmm. One of your biggest platforms, as you mentioned, is, the environment, earth stewardship, and specifically looking at the equal and intentional distribution of PSEF dollars, or the Portland Clean Energy Fund. Can you give us an example on how you would approach these priorities?
Well, in terms of the environment, I think number one priority, the can that's been kicked down the road for decades, we've got to figure out what to do with the CEI hub that's down in Linton, and that part of the river. It's built on unstable infill, and it's going to dump millions of gallons of fuel into the river, even with a moderate 5.0 earthquake. That has to be addressed. I think if the new mayor did one thing in their term, if that were it, that would be great. We're talking generations of people, and not just people, our environment. So that is a critically important part of my platform. And then the more equitable distribution of PSEF dollars, shade equity out in East Portland, making sure that people have shelter, water, food during these climate crises, whether it's an ice storm or a heat dome. There are so many unused churches, for instance, where I'm thinking, can we make those into community sites where people know that they can go and they can access food and water and air conditioning or heat when those things happen? Just trying to network and imagine ideas that are practical, easily implementable, because we're going to need that in 2 months. We're going to need that again in 6 months. We need those things urgently. So use those PSEF dollars to kind of do an emergency coordination to make sure that there are facilities open immediately, because these crises are coming.
Right. So if you could get one thing done,
it'd be the CEI hub. Make sure that that is more stable. It's not going to pollute our river. I love our current generation. We're great, but I want to make sure that 7 generations from now, they still have a beautiful home. Stretch goal, I'd love to see the salmon come back up, the Willamette and the Columbia. That is a barometer of health to me. I am a visionary. I want a balanced world. I even, out on the campaign trail, I've even met developers who are talking about circular economies. These ideas sound radical, but it's time for them. We're in such a crisis climate-wise that it's time to think radically and act radically.
Mm-hmm. Would you yourself think that you are a pretty long shot bid for mayor, or are you pretty sure that you have a very good chance of winning? I'm curious what you think.
What I think, I've been told by many people in many different quadrants of the city that they see this as a battle for the city's soul against me and one other candidate. And I see that. It's a lot of pressure on me. I want to win Portland's soul. And I'm in it as much as I can be to win it. Personally, when I look at my schedule and I'm, working so hard at shift work and I'm not able to attend some of these endorsement interviews, I get pretty sad and overwhelmed. I'm like, I could fight this battle and save the city's soul, but I need time and I need funding. And our campaign funding has been pretty robust, considering we've been in it for 3 months, but I'm still slogging away at Mary's, which I love, and Bunk. And just sometimes I'm like, wow, if I if I had an extra $100,000 to bankroll a couple years off and to hire a campaign manager and to really do this properly, I would win. I know I would win. So, hey, everybody who's listening to CityCast, if you know any like pro bono campaign managers or field directors, we can win this, but I need those people to appear now. And we've had great volunteers appear at every juncture we need them, but we kind of need those big paycheck ones, and we don't have the funds in our campaign to pay them just yet.
Well, I'm ending every one of our interviews, our mayoral candidate interviews, with the same question. So like you, I used to, play in bands, and I don't know, did you go on tour with your bands?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you know how it is when you go on tour, how you kind of miss like this one thing from your city. For us, it was always salad. We're always just like, I just want to go to New Seasons and I want to eat a salad. I'm curious, like, what was the thing you missed the most when you left Portland for work, or vacation?
Oh, interesting. I mean, I always had the reverse thing where the second I got over the clouds, I was like, oh my God, there's blue sky up here. I can breathe. But what did I miss about Portland? I mean, the feeling of being in a rainforest and all the secrets passed amongst the trees. Like my band played in Copenhagen and took the boat to Stockholm or Malmo. But I miss the forests, and I live on Mount Tabor, and I'm out there every day just absorbing messages from the dirt and the worms and the trees and the bald eagles and the crows. So I would say that fecundity, that being in a rainforest. And I thought you were going to ask me what my campaign song was going to be, and I wanted to tell you it's the Neo Boys' Rich Man's World. Oh, wait, Rich Man's Dream. But you should ask
I really should. That is such a good idea, Leave, is everyone's campaign song. Oh my God. We're going to make sure that we'll reach out to the only other person we've interviewed so far and ask him that question.
Okay. And then
let me set you up, Leave. Let me set you up.
Yes.
Okay. Well, final question. If you had to choose a campaign song, what would it be?
Rich Man's Dream by Portland's Neo Boys. Absolutely.
Why?
I love that band. They don't have as much notoriety as like the Wipers. They're from, I'd say, the late 70s, early 80s. I think it was a female trio. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a lo-fi punk, reminds me of the Satyricon, speaking truth to power in kind of a poetic and kind of perverse way. I want a Neo Boys shirt, and I think I'm gonna have to screen it myself. I don't think they are out there, but I'm going to 2nd Avenue later to see.
Well, Leaf, thank you so much for taking time out of your really busy schedule. I know that, working 2 jobs, you're a single mom, you're also running for mayor. So thank you so much for taking this bit of time to chat with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on again. Have a great day.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thank you.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim.